Hello, everyone. Thanks for everyone for coming. Before I get started, I just want to let everyone know this is being recorded, and also there are people participating online through Zoom or whatever. So just want to make sure everyone knows this is being recorded, and presumably the proponent will post it sometime that maybe they can provide that detail. I'm sorry?
Who are you?
Yeah, I will get to that. Sure. I'm Alex. I'm Alex Drisky from the MEPA office. So MEPA stands for Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act. It's administered by the Secretary of the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. And why don't I give just a little bit of overview of how the meeting will go, then I'll provide some, I will start by providing some background information about the MEPA review process and our schedule for review. And then the proponent will provide a presentation describing the project. And then there'll be time for people to ask questions or make comments. There's a sign-in sheet going around just for signing into the meeting. I'd appreciate it if you signed in. It's not mandatory, but I would appreciate that. And there's also a sign-in sheet in the event you want to make a comment or ask a question after the presentation's over. And, we'll see how many people sign up and, whether it makes sense to, ask people to keep it to a couple minutes or whatever, but I'll hopefully, everyone will have plenty of time to ask whatever questions they have. All right. Purpose of MEPA. I'd like to emphasize that MEPA is not a permitting process. It's sort of a planning level review, comprehensive review of projects that meet two criteria. First of all, they require some kind of state agency action. So in the case of this project, it requires permits from state agencies. So that, therefore, it's under MEPA jurisdiction for that reason. And the second criteria is that a project has to meet or exceed our environmental thresholds that are listed in our regulations. So this project exceeds the impact threshold related to disturbance of land under the ocean. Also construction of transmission lines greater than 5 miles in length. And also potentially the use of parkland is related to the use of the beach for bringing the cable shore. Purpose of MEPA is to, since it's not a permitting process, it's really a public disclosure process. It's intended to require these larger projects to disclose their impacts and identify mitigation measures, and to allow the public to participate sort of this stage of the project before the permitting process starts. It's also intended to help state agencies who are going to be taking actions, permits in this case, to sort of get more information and ask for more information from the proponent. And it's, intended to ensure that projects take all feasible measures to avoid damage to the environment. And if damage to the environment can't be avoided, then to identify mitigation measures that can minimize impacts. And a key part of MEPA review is analysis of alternatives that establish sort of the environmental variables and the levels of impact of various parts of the project. So MEPA has two levels of review. By far, most projects, probably 90%, are at our lower threat level of review, and they typically require the filing of an environmental notification form. Then there's a public review of that, and MEPA, the MEPA staff reviews it, and then the project's done. The other level requires, in addition to the ENF, that environmental notification form, also requires a preparation of environmental impact reports. So that's the category that this project is in. It's filed in environmental notification form. We're in the review period and the comment period for that. And when that's finished, there'll be a certificate issued by the secretary that identifies the scope of information and analyses that must be provided in the draft environmental impact report. So it's up to the proponent to prepare that. on their schedule. There's no deadline for the MEPA imposes for that. But once they submit the draft environmental impact report to the MEPA office, it'll be, they must also distribute it to the public, anyone who's commented on the ENF. And there'll be another 30-day comment period at that time. Same thing, there'd be a certificate issue that identifies additional information or analyses that must be provided in the final environmental impact report. So we're at the very beginning of the MEPA process here. And your input is really critical at this stage because we are gathering information for what the issues are that they really should be focusing on, providing more information on in that draft environmental impact report. So I encourage everyone to submit comments. I will be taking notes tonight, but this is not a public hearing. So to get on the record formally, you must submit comments in writing, send them either by email to me or we have a public comments portal where you can upload comments. And I believe the proponent has a slide with information on how to send me emails or submit comments to the portal. Another important reason to comment is that the proponent, well, first of all, it will help me inform my review of the project. And as I said, that help me develop a scope for the draft EIR. But also the proponent is required to respond to all the comments that have been submitted. So in the draft EIR. So if you submit a comment, they're passed along to the proponent. And then the draft EIR will include a section where all the comments that were submitted are, there are copies of every comment and then responses to each comment that was made in the comment letters. And then finally, if you submit a comment on the ENF, you will receive notification that when the draft environmental impact report is filed, and presume probably a download link for accessing that document when it's ready. Let's see. So, MEPA, again, is not a permitting process, but state agencies cannot take permitting actions on a project until MEPA is concluded. So, as I mentioned, there are a couple of permits from DEP, or maybe I didn't. There are a couple of permits necessary for this project from DEP, a 401 water quality certificate, a Chapter 91 license. The Energy Facility Siting Board has to issue approval. Mass DOT has to issue an access permit for work in state roadways, and there's potentially a permit needed from the related to rare species for the natural heritage and endangered species program. So none of those permits can be issued until after MEPA is concluded. And just if a project makes it all the way through MEPA, it's not an approval. And it just moves on to the permitting phase, and state agencies apply their own standards, their own regulatory standards at that point. So if they can deny a project or approve a project after MEPA is concluded. So the comment period is going on now. It ends on the 29th. So encourage everyone to submit comments by then and earlier if possible. It's helpful to me to have comments as early as I can just to give me more time to review them, because I'm especially in a case like this where I anticipate getting a lot of comments. And then on 10 days later on the 9th, that certificate will be issued on the ENF. And that will be posted eventually on our website a few days later, where you can take a look at that. And again, certificate for on this ENF will not be an approval or anything. It will just simply provide a very detailed scope for the draft EIR that the proponent has to prepare after this. So again, it'll provide a detailed list of information and analyses that will have to be provided in the draft EIR.
Sorry, you're using a lot of acronyms.
Okay, I tried to
explain what they are.
So draft DEIR, I thought I was hoping that I had tried to lay that out. So DEIR is the draft environmental impact report. FEIR is final environmental impact report, and ENF, that's the stage we're at now, environmental notification form. Okay.
And can MEPA
That's Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act.
Okay.
That's, yeah. Any other questions?
Yes. Excuse me, is this a done deal already or?
Yeah, is this? Okay, I wish I had the microphone, I guess, because I just finished explaining that we're at the very beginning of the MEPA review. There'll be 2 documents after this, and not until after MEPA is finished does it even get to the permitting stage. So no, it's at the beginning of the review. State agencies haven't even started. I don't believe any of them have their applications, or I'm not even sure, not exactly sure about the application status, but you know, the permitting process has not begun, and MEPA reviews just started.
Yeah, real quick, can you describe the mission of MEPA in general?
Okay. So again, it's a public disclosure process. We don't apply environmental impact standards to a project. We just make sure that a proponent has adequately described the impacts of a project, looked at ways of minimizing or avoiding those impacts, and you know, publicly disclose the project and all its components to the public, and you know, builds the record for that will eventually be used by permitting agencies in this case down the road. And so that's really the purpose of MEPA. Yeah.
And is the comment period ending November 20th?
Yes.
Okay, that seems pretty short.
Well, the comment period has been extended by 30 days, so it's actually been the whole comment period is 50 days total, I believe. So our typical comment period for an ENF environmental notification form is only 20 days. So it's already been extended by 30 days. And as I said, you know, there'll be 2 more documents coming in after this that will have comment periods as well.
And, oh, sorry.
Just for a clarification, I'd like to, a question that was asked before, just say it another way and a little bit more direct. Has the town of Barnstable approved this project already?
Okay, I don't know. Yeah.
Okay, but
Yeah, MEPA is related to state agency actions, but the town is totally independent of MEPA, can take whatever actions it can want. Desires, you know, before MEPA is concluded, even so. Yeah.
When you talk about this, what type of comment, as an environmental agency, when you're looking for comments from the public, what type of comments do you tend to see? Because I think there's probably a lot of adverse feelings within the town, but would that impact your report? It sounds to me that I would imagine not. But so what type of comments would be helpful?
Yeah. If you've had a chance to review the document, helpful comments are that particular resources weren't adequately described or not described at all. That you believe the impact will be greater than maybe was presented in the ENF, or that there are other aspects of an impact that were not sort of listed in the ENF. You know, your opinions or preference about a project is, you know, that's a typical component of a comment. So that's perfectly okay to state your opinion about a project. But in terms of, again, you know, this developing a scope, you know, for what the draft environmental impact report has, you know, those kinds of information that's missing, or analyses that really have to be, you know, carried out in more detail. That's very helpful for us.
No, that makes sense. And when is that draft report expected to be completed, or has it already been?
No, so that the draft report will be prepared by the proponent after they get the certificate that tells them sort of what the scope is, what they have to do.
But then we might not have enough time to comment on it. If that isn't done until the 6th of November, and comments, that's only giving us 3 days to review and comment.
No, that, yeah, now you'd be commenting on the ENF, environmental notification form. Then there'd be a certificate with the scope. Then it may take probably take several months at a minimum for the proponent to prepare that draft environmental impact report. And then that will be distributed to everyone to review that document.
So between now and November 29th, what would we be looking at to review and comment on?
that environmental notification form, yeah.
Where do we find that?
Yeah,
It's on the Commonwealth Wind website.
so will you have
Commonwealthwind.org.
we have a slide showing that?
We do.
Yeah, okay, there'll be a slide showing where you can get that.
Al, I have a question.
Yeah.
And I'm not an expert in all this, but this seems, sure, thanks. This focus on, the impact on the environment, that type of thing. It feels to me like we're doing maybe one of the most important things last. So I would have expected that somebody would have done a study, or there's a environmental protection agency study. I don't have the acronyms down. But, we got people digging holes and buying permits and everything else. And now we're gonna get into the impact on the environment. When in fact, it just seems to me, as a naive resident, wouldn't we check that first? The impact on the environment?
Yeah, I guess, oh, well, again, I don't know how the town, managed their approval process, so. But for state agencies, that's what's happening. This MEPA process is preceding the state agencies who have to issue permits. So they will not issue permits until this review process is finished. So I think, at the state level, it is happening the way you were recommending. Any other questions? All right. So again, we will take, I think we'll hold questions until after the presentation, and there'll be plenty of time for everyone to ask questions. And I'll turn over to the proponent now.
Good evening, everyone. Nice to be here again. I see some familiar faces and some new faces, so glad to have you all here. I want to acknowledge Councilor Cusack is here with us tonight. Thank you for coming, and Alex, thank you for moderating this and setting it up. My name is Ken Kimmel. I'm the Vice President for Offshore Wind Development at AVANGRID. So tonight, what we want to do, I'll briefly show you who's on the team. We'll go over the review and permitting process, and maybe by doing that, we may help answer some of the questions I've heard about what stage are we actually in this project and what's going to happen next. And then we'll give a robust overview of the project and all the different components of it, particularly as they affect our onshore work, although we'll talk about the offshore work as well. And then certainly we're going to leave plenty of time for comments. So I'm not going to ask everyone to raise their hand. I don't want to take up that time, but what I do want to show you is we have quite a team of internal and external experts. Many of the people on the team are here tonight. I dare say that they should be able to answer every single question that's going to be composed because they represent a wide variety of expertise. So I'm glad to have them all here. This is just a slide that I think helps back up what Alex was saying, which is we're in this MEPA environmental disclosure process right now. When that's done, every one of those permits we have to apply for and receive. Some of them are local, some of them are regional, some of them are state. And of course, we also have an enormous permitting proceeding going on with the federal government concerning all the work that we're doing way offshore, 20 or 25 miles offshore. So that's the federal government, but everything that we're doing on land and within 3 miles of the shore is regulated by all these different agencies. And in answer to your question, it's certainly not a done deal. We haven't even applied for most of these permits, much less gotten them. So this really is the beginning of a very significant opportunity for us to share information, hear your comments, and make our case to the various state agencies and others who have to approve the project. Before we get into all the details, I do want to take a step back and just highlight the importance of this project. This is a 1,200 megawatt offshore wind project. It's going to generate enough clean energy for 700,000 homes. It's going to reduce our carbon footprint by 2.3 million tons. That would be the same thing as taking 460,000 cars off the road each year. This will be our largest clean energy project in Massachusetts and one of the largest in the country. And I think everyone is also focused not only on the fact that we need clean energy, we need to diversify our fuel supply. We are dangerously dependent on one fuel, that's natural gas. And if you are an a national grid customer, you've heard that electric rates are going to go up by about $115 a month because gas prices are soaring. We haven't heard from Eversource yet, but I imagine we're going to hear a similar increase there. And that's all because we're depending too much on one fuel for our supply. And so when Russia starts a war with Ukraine, half the way around the globe, it affects all of us. So the other real benefit of this project is this is homegrown energy that we have control over. The wind isn't going to spike in prices once this project is built. And so we really need to diversify that energy supply. And that's part of the major benefit. And then the other piece is a massive creation of jobs as Massachusetts leads the nation in launching a whole new offshore wind industry. So we're extremely proud of this project, extremely excited about it, and eager to move it to the finish line. I also want to just talk about some of the local benefits. We have two other projects, as I think many of you are aware of, the Vineyard Wind 1 project, which is being built as we speak, and the Park City Wind project, which is going to happen next. And this is the third one. For the Vineyard Wind 1 and the Park City projects, we've had an amazing collaboration with the town of Barnstable. In addition to us providing host community benefits, we are collaborating on a joint sewer and electric cable project. So we open that road once, the town puts in a sewer line, we follow with an electric line, the road gets closed up. So once rather than twice, we're paying for a lot of the design and engineering work, and we've committed to paying for the coating and repaving of the road when we're done, saving the town millions of dollars, but also expediting the town's sewering of these communities, which has really made Barnstable the leader on Cape Cod in really addressing this problem. And we are so excited about the prospect of doing the exact same thing for this third project. We are eager to explore with the town the possibility of jointly laying electric cable and sewering in parts of Osterville. We have learned through our time in the community how the Three Bays area, for example, is a significantly degraded waterway that really needs to get cleaned up. We've heard that sewering is a big part of the answer to that problem, and we would be very excited to help expedite and assist the town in meeting that water quality objective. So on top of the revenue, on top of the coordination on the sewer, we will be extremely sensitive in the construction to the quality of life issues. We're not going to do work on the beach or on the roadways during the summer months. We're going to work with neighborhood associations and business associations to minimize the disruption. And finally, we're going to build these projects, all aspects of them, in accordance with the highest level of environmental stewardship. Everything is going to be underground, with the sole exception of a substation, which is going to be located in a very remote part that won't be visible or noisy for folks. The site is selected for that reason. So our goal is to have a very minimal and temporary disruptive impact, but to give the town permanent benefits. That's the goal. The last thing I want to talk about, and then I'm going to hand it over to one of our experts, is just kind of the jurisdiction issue. So these green figures at the bottom, that's part of our lease area that I said is about 25 to 30 miles from Barnstable. And that's where the three projects are being constructed. The blue line is a cable corridor where we're going to put our electric cable to connect from the wind turbines to the land. And that's a cable corridor that was decided upon by the federal government, by the fishing community and others. And the idea of it was put all your cables in one place, don't have them going all over Nantucket Sound. So we're gonna do that there. As I said, the federal government is really in charge of most of the permitting of that cable and of the wind farms, but The towns have jurisdiction of everything that happens within 3 miles, so you can see Martha's Vineyard is gonna have the opportunity to weigh in, as is Nantucket, and certainly Barnstable, including the local Conservation Commission, will have that opportunity too. So because tonight is really about state permits, I think we're mostly going to be focusing on what we're doing within 3 miles of shore and all the work that we're going to do on land, as opposed to what we're doing out in the ocean. Although, you know, like anything else, we'll take questions on that if people want to hear more about that. So I'm going to stop there.
One
And-
question.
yeah.
Can you tell us the location of the substation?
Yeah, it's north of Route 6, Clay Hill area.
What village is that in?
It's in
West
West Barnstable.
Up Oak Street, West Barnstable.
Of which street?
Oak Street.
It comes up in the slide deck.
Yeah, it will be shown. Yeah. Any other questions? Well, actually, what I think we'll do is hold questions if we could, so Mark can do his presentation. We'll take questions afterwards. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Ken. Good evening, everybody. Good to see everybody in person. My name is Mark Bergeron with Epsilon Associates, project manager with the environmental consulting firm for this project. Just as background, Epsilon Associates was involved with permitting the first 2 projects, and now we are also involved with the construction phase of the first project. What I'd like to do this evening is walk you through the different project components, starting with the offshore export cable corridor, working all the way into the substation. So as Ken mentioned, during the previously completed siting process for the lease area from which this project originates, it was determined through a lengthy process and extensive stakeholder input that the proposed offshore export cable corridor, or I'll refer to it as the OECC for the remainder of the presentation, allowed for less environmental impacts than any other alternative considered, and was wide enough to accommodate multiple projects from the lease area that you see in the bottom of the screen here. So the OECC avoids any special, sensitive, or unique areas as identified in the Massachusetts Ocean Management Plan, including the avoidance of northern right whale core habitat, which you can see is mapped right here. And it was designed to make sure that the cables from this lease area are not going all over Nantucket Sound, as Ken previously mentioned. So note that the proposed cables for the New England Wind 2 connector project will be the 3rd set of cables to be installed within the existing OECC corridor. This cutout down here provides a perspective of this light blue corridor here. And so what you'll see is in the eastern portion of this corridor is the Vineyard Wind Connector 1 cables. There's 2 sets of cables. In the middle of this corridor is the New England 1 connector, or the Park City Wind Project cables. And this particular project, the 3rd project, New England Wind 2 connector project, is proposed in the western portion of the primary OECC.
And so this.
Go ahead. I see. This is an example of an offshore cable set.
These guys down here. This marker.
And so in the ENF application, you might note that we're also identifying the potential use of what we're calling the Western Muskegon variant. And we refer to this blue corridor as the primary OECC, and it does extend from the lease area and goes through the towns of Barnstable, Edgartown, Nantucket, and Mashpee. So there's still a potential that all 3 of these cables cannot fit in the primary OECC. So as we work out the engineering, and also due to the installation of the Vineyard Wind 1 cables, which is upcoming, there may be a potential for 1 or 2 of the cable sets to be located in the Western Muskegon variant. So if you're looking at our ENF, you may see various options for installation of the cable in the state waters here in the Western Muskegon area. The Western Muskegon variant has been studied extensively as part of the Vineyard Wind 1 project as well. So for perspective, before I leave the OECC ranges in width from 3,100 feet to 5,500 feet along portions that are located within state waters. So that's the width of this corridor here, with a typical width of 3,500 feet. And all of the OECC cables will be typically separated by a distance ranging from approximately 165 feet to 330 feet. So that's the spacing between these cables, 165 to 330 feet. The cables will be installed by a jet plow installation. with the target depth of 5 to 8 feet below the seafloor. And the company has completed extensive sediment dispersion modeling for the offshore export cable that demonstrates that the suspended sediments from the cable installation activities for the project will not have any long-term detrimental effects to marine life. And this study was included in our ENF as attachment I. We'll move to the landfall location now. Just to give you a little bit of a background on how we select a landfall location. There are several key factors that we were looking at in trying to find a location for this to land this project. First and foremost is a location that is in close proximity to an existing onshore substation that has available capacity to accept the electricity generated from the project, and which can inject it into the 345 kilovolt transmission system. So there are limited electrical substations within reasonable proximity to the offshore cable. And most importantly, the company has a queue position to connect 1,200 megawatts at the West Barnstable substation. And a queue position means that the company is first in line ahead of any other entity that would seek to connect to this substation. And extensive studies have been done by the ISO New England, who's the independent system operator, showing that this substation has the capacity to handle this amount of electricity coming in, which is not the case with all substations, on the Cape. So another factor is to maximize the use of the previously identified OECC corridor to minimize impacts and avoid impacts to sensitive marine resources. And so once it was established that this project would connect into the West Barnstable substation and seek to maximize the use of the OECC, landing areas within Barnstable with adequate room for onshore space to put the horizontal directional drilling activities, and it has to have adequate water depth offshore to facilitate the horizontal directional drill activities for this project. And I'll discuss a little bit more in several slides, but horizontal directional drilling is an extremely important construction aspect for this project, because it allows this project to be installed underneath sensitive marine resources such as eelgrass, beach, dunes, and bank, so that we don't have to open cut or any salt marsh. You can drill underneath and go underneath and not directly impact any of those resources. So another important factor in finding a suitable landfall location is consideration of surrounding land uses such as residences and businesses. And ideally, we want to try to find a location where we can get some distance away from residences and businesses. So the company evaluated a number of potential landfall locations for the project, and these are all shown here in this figure, and which also included looking at Covels and Craigville beaches, which are the location of the first two projects' landfalls. And after extensive review, the engineering team determined it wasn't feasible to construct this project at either Covels or Craigville Beach due to the conflicts with the existing projects. And we concluded that Douse's Beach is the only suitable location that meets all of the criteria they've been talking about on this slide. To emphasize, this location is similar to the first two landings in that we can set up a horizontal directional drill. There's enough space in the parking lot. The offshore water depths are suitable, and we are some distances from residences.
So if you're sitting at Douse's Beach, do you see anything?
I'll go through some slides, maybe help you get some perspective. So this project, this slide rather is just to give you a perspective on all three of the projects. I think I just did on the last slide, and we have to have enough room for a horizontal directional drill. We have to have potential egress to the public roadway systems away from houses. And we are in close proximity to the substation, the point of interconnection to the grid interconnection.
One more question. You said you couldn't use Cobble or Craigville, but there is work going on there. So what project's going on there?
That's correct. So with this slide, we're attempting to show, and again, I'd be happy to answer all questions at the end. I'm going to work through each component of the project, and we can take all the time we need to come back and answer questions. So this shows the first project that goes to Covels Beach, and then actually connects into the grid at the Barnstable switching station. This is the second project at Craigville Beach. going up to the West Barnstable substation, which is the same point of here, which is the same point of interconnection that we have for this project. And this is the third project here. So again, we can talk a little bit more about this, but essentially, there's not enough room at Cobbles Beach for this project to land and have a transition joint bays. And I'll provide a little bit more information about the actual facilities and how much space they take up on the next couple of slides.
Did you not know that ahead?
Right, so again, I'll be happy to answer questions at the end.
You ask questions as you go along.
Well, so some of the additional slides, the next slide I'm going to show will actually provide some perspective on what we're talking about and help to maybe formulate some different questions and actually answer some of your questions.
Yeah, I think I would prefer to get through the presentation. I heard it yesterday, maybe some of the other folks that participated in that meeting. But anyway, so a lot of these questions will be answered as it goes on, and then we will get back to it. But I'd just like to let him finish up and then get out to the questions after that. Thanks.
So just to zoom in on Dowses Beach, again, this is Dowses Beach from an aerial perspective. Now, this slide shows one of the three proposed cable landings along the offshore to onshore transition where the horizontal directional drilling will be used to install the cables. The aerial photograph shows the start of the HDD operation here offshore, and which is approximately 1/2 mile from the Dowses Beach parking lot here on this side of the aerial photograph. So at this particular point here, a barge will be set up and HDD drilling operations will commence. Each HDD process begins with drilling a pilot hole and then reaming it out, having more passes until you get the circumference or diameter of the trench that you need to install your cables. There'll be an entry exit pit set up here in the parking lot for the cable pull. So again, this cross section shows that from the barge, the hole will be drilled down to a depth of 50 feet, up again and under all of the beach, the dunes, the bank, and into the parking area. So there'd be no activities or impacts, disturbance whatsoever on the beach and the dunes to any adjacent salt marsh areas.
So how it's
It's a depth of up to 50 feet.
even on the beach?
On the beach, as it angles back up, is an approximate depth of 30 feet, I believe, below the beach area here as it angles. Here's a steep angle coming from the 50 feet back up into the parking area.
How about under the sand?
30 feet. 30 feet. So as noted here, this is showing some of the coastal resources that Dowses Beach, the beach and the dunes area. Just want to emphasize that all of the cables will be installed deep under these areas and up to the surface of the parking lot. So there'll be no construction activities whatsoever on the beach, in the dunes, in the marsh, or along the shoreline, as the HDD does not require a trench of any kind. So this slide shows the location of all three cables to be installed via the HDD operations. We were just looking at this particular drill line. There are two other drill paths that will then make landfall similar to this first one, the cross section I showed you, at these transition joint bays in the parking lot area only. So construction for this project, landing at Dowses Beach will take place after Labor Day and before Memorial Day over 2 separate construction seasons. There'll be no construction during the summer months, and all disturbed areas will be repaved so that the parking lot can be fully utilized and enjoyed during the summer months. And based on public input we've heard to date, the company is developing a sequence for the work at Dowses Beach, as shown here, to minimize closures of the parking area to the public. And however, there is a need to balance safety and the ability of the contractor to maximize productivity as well. So although the details are still being finalized, the goal is to sequence this work so that a complete closure is only necessary for a portion of one of the 2 construction seasons. So details will be provided in some stage of the NEPA process as the exact sequencing of works developed, but in general, portions of the public parking lot at Dowses Beach will remain open to the public during the majority of the construction and access to the handicap accessible fishing pier at the east end of the Dowses Beach parking lot will be prioritized. In addition, the company will consult with the Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program. They're the state agency responsible for stewardship of rare and endangered species in the state. We will be working with them to develop a construction period protection measures at Dowses Beach for piping plover and least tern, which are protected species. We expect these plans to be developed similar to the New England One Connector Project and the New Wind One Connector Project, because we had piping plover at those landings as well. So such measures as time of year restrictions, nesting surveys prior to construction, and full-time monitoring by a qualified biologist during construction will be implemented. Just want to end on the landfall with a picture of the parking area at Dowses Beach. I know you're all familiar with it, but just want to emphasize again that all of the construction activities that we just showed you on the plan will be limited to these paved surfaces.
Will the beaches be available to be walked on during when the construction is going on?
Be happy to answer that question at the end. I've got a few more slides to get through and then so I show on this slide, each of the cables from the transition joint bays will then, which are here, these are the 3 joint bays in the parking area, will come down into a single duct bank and then leave the parking area up the Causeway Road out to East Bay Road over the existing culvert. This particular cross section here shows how these cables can be put over the top of this existing culvert. There's been some engineering studies done on that. We're confident that this configuration over the culvert will allow us to take the 3 sets of cables, put them into a single duct bank, have them leave the over Causeway Road, over the culvert, and into the public roadway system onto the up to the substation site. Transitioning now from the landfall to the onshore export cable route, the company identified a number of potential roadway and even electric transmission corridors in the area that we could route from the landfall to the substation, which is here, just to the north of Route 6 in purple. And I do have a better graphic later in the presentation. And we did an analysis on the different impacts to natural resources, residents, businesses along the way, potential for traffic congestion. So after performing this routing analysis, we've identified 2 routes that remain in consideration for this project coming from the landfall to the substation. The preferred route is this yellow route, which comes up Weano Avenue, up Main Street, and up to Old Falmouth Road, to Oak Street, into the substation. The second route is up East Bay Road, Old Mill Road, 5 Corners, and up to the substation. The construction of this export cable will not take place during the summer months. The company will work with the town to identify the sequencing and timing of the work to minimize construction-related impacts to residences and businesses in the area. All of these cables will be installed within a single duct bank and manhole system, completely underground within the public roadway layouts. These 2 figures just show typicals, what the trench and the depth of the cables may be buried. So this is a typical where there are no conflicting utilities. It shows that the 3 sets of cables are arranged in a 3x4 configuration. Where there's utilities and they have to be deeper, you'll see there's a little bit more depth to the cables to get around existing utilities. So prior to construction, a detailed traffic management plan will be developed. In addition, during construction of the project, as Ken indicated, it's temporary. They dig as much trench as they can backfill each day to install the cable and continue to move that way. They'll employ best management practices to minimize construction-related air, noise, and dust impacts. This particular slide shows those routes and actually lists the names. I'm not going to read them all out, but the shading underneath shows the town of Barnstable sewer phasing plan. The point we want to make with this slide is kind of emphasize that the preferred route for this project does maximize the potential to accelerate the town sewer phasing project, as more of that route is located within areas planned for sewering versus our secondary route that we identified as a noticed alternative route. And finally, the onshore substations. The company is proposing a new substation on an approximately 15.5 acre parcel of land located off of Oak Street and just north of Route 6, shown here. This yellow line is the onshore export cable that I was just talking about. So that will come up Oak Street, go down Service Road, be installed via trenchless technology underneath Route 6 into the new substation facility. There are no wetlands or rare species on this particular substation site. You can see it actually extends all the way out to the Eversource right away as well, and down to the state highway layout for Route 6. There is an existing fire tower that's active here. It's a state of Massachusetts asset located just to the south of the substation, kind of on this parcel here. And there's an existing access roadway off of Oak Street to that fire tower. The company is still investigating the potential for the grid interconnection route, because once we take the cables to the new project substation, it also has to then be connected to the point of interconnection, which is here. This is the West Barnstable substation. Again, this is where we're going to put the electricity into the grid. So the electricity is stepped down, I believe, or actually stepped up rather. I'm sorry, I'm not an electrical engineer. At the substation, and then there will be about a half a mile cable run over to this substation. We're looking at 3 different options, which would be taking the cables out down the Instar Eversource right away, taking the cables out the existing access roadway to Oak Street Fire Tower, or taking them down the state highway layout up to Oak Street and into the West Barnstable substation. My last slide, just wanted to highlight some of the additional environmental monitoring that will be done post-construction for the project. So this will include a benthic habitat monitoring plan, a fisheries monitoring plan, an offshore bird and bat monitoring plan, and piping plover and leech pond protection plan.
That's an important.
So there's last couple slides here. So this shows the opportunities to comment as part of the NEPA process. If you'd like to review our ENF, you can go to commonwealthwind.com/permitting to find that. And these are the ways. That's Alex's email. Alex is the gentleman here who spoke at the beginning. If you want to send comments, you can email him to him directly or using the portal. One of the things that Alex has said is that if you do snail mail them, some of the relevant staff are not in the office all the time. So it's recommended that you email your comments to Alex so he sees them as soon as possible, or use that link as well. Upcoming other meetings we have here at the library, we'll have a Zoom one in December, another in person in January, in person in February, and in Zoom in March. You can find all of these dates on commonwealthwind.com/events. This is our contact information. Myself and Rachel, who's in the white sweater over here, are the my name is Pat Johnson. I lead the community outreach for this project here in Barnstable, as does my colleague Rachel over there as well. Those are our cell phone numbers and emails. Please reach out if you'd like to meet, talk with us, or learn more. And that's it. I'm going to turn it over to Alex now to talk about how we're going to do the questions.
Also, just so my email contact is here. We filed the ENF form. And so if you do want a copy or a link to that, please email me and I will send you a direct link to the ENF document.
And his contact information is on the print as well.
How you want to do questions? Make manuals, you want to say?
Thanks. So could you put the contact slide back up? I don't know if anyone wants to take a picture, maybe just to save yourself from writing down the email address. Okay, great. Sorry, I didn't think of that. All right, so do we have a list of people who signed up to speak? Is that it? Great. All right, so we'll doesn't look like too many people have signed up, right? Yeah, so I'd like to start it with a question, though. If you could, I think somebody asked this and I wanted to know this as well, but maybe if you could go to sort of an overview slide and show everywhere where there be above ground structures, sort of upon completion of the project.
So the only place there will be above ground structures resulting from this project will be at the onshore project substation here north of Route 6 off of Oak Street. Every other component of this project will be underground.
Okay. When they come up through, when they step up in the parking lot, what kind of structure will be in the parking lot? And it sounded like there were 3 locations. What would they look like? How much space do they take? And
Good question, thank you. These are the transition joint bays, which are underground. They're large vaults. And so much like manholes that you see in the street that have circular covers at grade in the parking area, these are a little bit bigger. So what you'll see at grade in the parking area will be more of a rectangular cover to access into the vaults at grade with the pavement in the parking lot.
so they won't step up through the ground,
They-
and there's no structures standing, taking up parking.
Correct, they will not.
Rich. Hey, Alex, before we get, I just want to acknowledge, we have folks on Zoom as well, just for everyone here in person. There's a lot of folks on Zoom, so we're going to take questions from the audience. Periodically, we'll go to Zoom as well. And I'm going to ask everybody, I'm going to bring this mic to you so that folks on Zoom can hear you. So please, if you don't mind using the mic, I'll come to you. And then the speaker can use that mic there so folks on Zoom can hear. And I do want to lastly say this is being video recorded, and this whole meeting video will be on the Osterville Library YouTube page in the next couple of days. So anybody wants to rewatch this, you know, the Osterville Library YouTube page, should be up maybe next couple of days.
I'll just finish answering the question about above ground features. So the question was raised also, what about the bridge crossing at the culvert at Dows's Beach? So there'll be nothing above ground there. There's enough cover on the existing culvert where we can still bury the cables over the top of it, put additional cover there. There's still room at that head wall, so there's more space to essentially raise the road there, install the cables over the top of that culvert.
Thank you. All right, so it seems like maybe everyone didn't get a chance to sign in, so we'll make do. We'll, you know, it's if you didn't get a chance to sign in, we'll get around to you. But I will start by calling people who signed up on this sign-in sheet. So Suzanne Conley. I don't know if I need this.
My name is Suzanne Conley. I own a home here in Osterville, and I'm speaking on behalf of our ad hoc community activist group, Save Greater Dows's Beach. At this moment in time, we have collected 988 signatures on petitions to oppose the use of Dows's Beach for the proposed landing of 3 electrical export cables from a future offshore wind farm. Residents from every one of the 7 villages of Barnstable have joined our cause. This is not an issue for people who live in Osterville only. I cannot overstate the extent of dismay and anger this proposal has generated in our community. Mr. Strisky, I hope you have a chance to visit the Dows's area firsthand. Its nature is certainly not well described in the ENF, all 467 pages of which I've read twice. First of all, it is one of the most beautiful, unique, peaceful, and accessible public recreation areas fronting Nantucket Sound in the town of Barnstable. We call it Greater Dows's Beach because it is a complex estuarine environment, including a barrier spit, a dune system, an inlet, 2 bays, one of which has a mooring ground and a handicapped accessible fishing pier. All of this is accessed by a narrow causeway. The abundance of wildlife on land, in the sea, and in the air is evident to those who regularly enjoy the area year-round. And this we want to emphasize. AVANGRID Renewables keeps talking about only working during the off-season. There is no off-season at Dows's. For the many full-time residents of Barnstable for whom visits to Douses is an important aspect of the quality of life we have come to expect. If this project is allowed to proceed, Greater Douses Beach will never be the same, despite the claims of AVANGRID. Maintenance of the cables and communication lines through 3 large manholes in the parking lot would be an unwelcome occurrence. I can see utility trucks, equipment, and workers displacing beachgoers whenever the need arises, because Douses will no longer be ours. This is all unnecessary and only happening for 2 reasons. AVANGRID did not consider all options for exporting electricity from its lease area and did not give precedence to landings that would be the least disruptive to the environment and to life, human and otherwise. Second, our town government has decided to try and fund its underfunded sewering project by sacrificing an important estuarine environment and a public resource they have held in trust for 76 years to a large-scale infrastructure project. Those who resent our opposition have dismissed us incredibly unfairly as crackpots, troublemakers, and uninformed. We've been called NIMBYists, climate change deniers, enemies of renewable energy development, our town's comprehensive wastewater management plan, and clean water, none of which is true. We only want AVANGRID renewables, also known as Commonwealth Wind, and whatever New England Wind 2 connector is, to find another more suitable location for their export cables. We are not going away. Please expect our comprehensive response to the ENF EEA number 16611 prior to November 29th. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Next person who signed up is Patricia Conway.
Patricia Conway. I've lived in Osterville for 35 years. The one thing I want to bring up here is, you might not know, is Douses Beach was owned by the Douses family. And during the hurricane of 1944, they decided not to rebuild where the present bathhouse is, and they donated to the town. So I want to see where you filed the change of use for that property, where it was donated for recreation and for everyone to enjoy. So where's the filing of the change of use? And the same thing, where is Cobal's change of use? That's a public beach that was part of the town. All of this is pushed through during COVID, you know, with the secret Zoom meetings that all of us are trying to save the public and take care of patients. They're having meetings during the COVID period of lockdown. I don't consider that informed consent. And the other thing that I am very upset about is, where is the Mass Audubon Society? For 3 years, we have been unable to go to Sampson's Island and Dead Neck because the piping plovers were nesting. And we also couldn't have fireworks because it disturbed the piping plovers. It is well documented in any literature that you research that you send the piping plovers, which are migrating birds, and the osprey, who always come back usually to their same nests, to the slaughter of the blades. And it's well documented about that. It's also well documented of the turbines disturbing under the water is 4 times louder than it is on air, and how that affects through the waves our whales, and they do come all through there. And there's definitely documentation I can show you that down in New Zealand and Australia, they had mass beaching of whales and porpoises, and they then did their narcolepsy, I guess you call it, and found that they died from the bends. And what they found was that the sonar and the sound in the water was making them jump out of the water and dive deep to get away from the sound, because they travel by navigating by their sound. And they died from the bends just like a diver would. So this is The only energy that should be here on the Cape and the Islands should be hydro energy, which has been proven for over 100 years that that's the best renewable energy for this area. And it's the most renewable energy throughout the world. 71% is hydro energy. So it's been working in New York and Ontario for 100 years. So this is the wrong project for this fragile environment for Cape and the Islands.
One or two more people then check.
Yeah, and can I just say, folks on Zoom, if you're on Zoom, please use the raise hand function or press *6 if you're using your phone, calling in to be on Zoom. My colleague Steve is on Zoom with you, and when we get to our first Zoom question, he will call on somebody who's raised their hand on Zoom. So just please raise your hand on Zoom if you'd like to ask a question.
Thanks. Next speaker is Brian Coble.
Thank you very much. That was pretty close. For the AVANGRID Wind group, thank you for the information. I mean, I've learned a lot tonight, and I know it's complex. And I find it a little interesting that from the MIPA perspective, referring to you guys as proponents kind of signals that there's opponents in the room. So I don't know if that's the healthiest environment with which to be discussing this with an open mind. But having said all that, I'd like to ask, I guess, from the outreach perspective, Rachel and Patrick, what data, if any, do you have to share that can show support for this program? I think Susan just mentioned some fairly specific data to share. I'd like to know if you have anything similar to share.
I appreciate it. Thank you for the question, sir. So we've been doing outreach here in Osterville since March. This project, we first went to the town council in I think March 17th, presented this to the town council for the first time. We then met with John Crow and the OVA board, Pete Hansen, others in this room were part of that meeting. Sort of welcomed us and asked for their feedback on bringing this to the Osterville community. They invited me to the April Osterville Village Association meeting back in June, and then again in September. Town Manager Ellis has been before the OVA twice in August and October. I have reached out to everybody in the village and different business owners over since March. Residents, anybody who would introduce me to other folks. I'm trying to be as accessible as possible personally. That says Rachel since she started. Been in front of the Osterville Rotary Club. We're going to be in front of the Osterville Men's Club next year. We're scheduled. We went to the Barnstable Lions Club. Anybody will talk to us, and anybody willing to sit down and talk about it. I don't have data. I guess in terms of what the data I do have is that your town council, who you elected, voted unanimously on November 3rd to move this project forward and to start a host community agreement with our company, which we're really proud of. And that's also because we've been talking with and working with all 13 town councilors and answering their questions as well. So we have that's what we're doing. And anybody here who wants to sit down, have coffee with us, go down the beach, critique and point things out in the parking lot, anywhere you want to meet, we're happy to do it. And we have our contact information that you all have. So thank you.
But there's nothing measured in terms of surveys or specific feedback.
We haven't done these surveys. We did. A lot of folks probably received our mailing about a week or so ago. So we sent a mailing to all Osterville residents that we could get an address for. If you didn't get that mailing, you can let me know. I'm happy to send you a PDF of it, or we're going to keep trying to expand our mailing list, and we're going to do other mailings. And as we're expanding our email list, we'll do emails as we're getting more folks from Osterville who sign up for our emails. And you can sign up for our emails at commonwealthwind.com/Barnstable. But so far, everything we've been doing is just trying to be accessible, go to as many meetings anytime we're invited. But we haven't done any type of surveys. We're just trying to send out accurate, factual information to the public in every way we can.
Excuse me.
Thanks.
I'm going to go down the list.
You need to have a meeting at the Barnstable High School. This is not adequate. We need a lot of space because a lot of people are upset about this.
I appreciate that, ma'am. And if that's what folks in Osterville want, we've talked about that. Understood, ma'am. And so we'll take that feedback. We're happy to do meetings at the Barnstable High School and Performing Arts Center if that would be the community's preference.
Okay, thanks. So next speaker, Matthew Cosma.
Someone working on the lights?
There you go. And there was light, and it was good. First, I'd like to thank the people of AVANGRID for providing the maps, the diagrams, and the verbiage, which further clarified my thinking of this whole project. And basically, if you looked at it, you're going through areas that are tourist and residential sections entirely. There's very limited manufacturing or industrial spaces on the Cape. Fortunately, it was one that brought me here, but if that's no longer in existence. However, my understanding, New Bedford is looking for different types of projects. And if you look at the map that you provided, the distance route between your wind farm and land falling on the Cape is not much different than land falling in New Bedford, which is an industrial area. And distribution of this electricity itself from New Bedford would be easier to all parts of Massachusetts. So my question is, was New Bedford considered, and if not, why? And if it was, why was it rejected as the potential landfall for this project?
So good question, Ken Kimmel answering it. We did look at New Bedford. We looked at a bunch of sites. There were two overriding considerations. One is that offshore export cable corridor, which we talked about, which was a negotiated corridor of the federal government, the fishing community, those who care about marine mammal habitat, bird habitat. It checked off all those boxes. And the idea was to stay within that corridor. That was one piece. A second piece, though, just as important, I think as Mark mentioned, one of the surprising things, which is something we really got to work on as a society to fix. There are a surprising lack of places that you can actually plug a wind farm of this size into the electric grid. And West Barnstable was one of the few places that had capacity. New Bedford does not. It has about 400 megawatts worth of capacity. We looked at it. It doesn't have 1,200. So that's why we took a hard look at it. We took a hard look at some other places along the shore. And unfortunately, because we're not quite ready as a society for really scaling up this resource, we have limited areas. And so that was part of the choice about West Barnstable.
Can I follow up? So Brayton Point, Acushnet, other locations in and around New Bedford, there are substations there, are there not?
Correct. Brayton Point would be a great site, except Mayflower Wind is ahead of us, and that's where they're going to connect, at least part of their project. They're also talking about Falmouth. I'm sorry? No, it's a separate project. The Brayton Point does not have capacity for their project and our project. They're ahead of us in this queue, which is kind of like your place in line. So that isn't going to work. There was another one you mentioned. Acushnet. That's the 400 megawatt substation that I was mentioning. It has 400 megawatts, but it won't have enough power it won't have enough capacity to accept power from this project.
What is involved in upgrading the substation to accept more power?
Years and years of study, years and years, potentially, millions and millions of dollars spent doing that with very uncertain results. And there's another piece of this. To take it out to Acushnet takes us outside of that cable corridor that we agreed to stay in. And some of the area where that would go, as I understand it, is a different kind of terrain that has more habitat value and more protections on it. So for environmental as well as economic reasons, it really wasn't as good an alternative as this one.
Right. So you said millions and millions of dollars to upgrade the substation. This individual, the Commonwealth Wind project, the budget is $5 billion.
I don't know the exact budget, but it's a lot.
5,000 million. So could AVANGRID kick in a couple million to help upgrade?
It's not a couple million. It's years and years of study. And it's not even clear that it would be successful at the end of the day. And I want to go back to this, it will have more environmental impact to do it that way.
Okay, Alex, you mind if we take a Zoom question?
I just want to follow up real quick. So before we started, someone asked what kind of comments are helpful. Those are great comments. Alternatives analysis is a focus, a big, important focus of NEPA. There's some level of that in the ENF, but we would typically scope, for more detailed explanations of why other alternatives are not feasible. So that's perfect. And also the other sites. So encourage you to follow up with some comments along those lines.
Okay, thank you, Alex. So I'd like to introduce Steve Tedros, my colleague is on Zoom. Steve, if you could introduce a speaker on Zoom, we'll take a Zoom question, then we'll go back to the next question in the room.
Thank you, Pat. We're going to start with William Cutcliffe. So William, I'm going to unmute you now. And if you could please unmute on your end and ask your question.
Good evening, Bill Cutcliffe calling from zooming in, should I say, from Florida. I just arrived down here. I'm a director and trying to stay on top of the project and just be totally informed so that we can represent the citizens well. And thank you. I did not sign up to talk. I was just directly attempting to make sure that I had the site, and I sent the site out to 24 people, unfortunately belatedly today. One thing I could suggest is that I desired to make sure people did know the Zoom tonight. And I probably spent a good 2 hours trying to put it together. So it'd be helpful if you good people would make it more readily available to people on Zoom. Other things I've been Zoomed with have been very forthright and upfront. And this one here, I spent a good half the day just trying to locate it so I could educate my fellow citizens about doing it. So thank you for doing it, and thank you having for the Zoom, and I won't take any more time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cutcliffe. Thank you. We'll do a few more in the room, then we'll go back to a Zoom question.
Can you bring the microphone up to Zoom? So
Yeah.
I can-
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Some of the questions, backward.
Yeah.
Paul Sylvester.
Oh, that's me. Oh, man. Thanks, Pat.
Paul Sylvester, I've been here permanently 7 years and place here since 2003. I'm going to try and hit 3 spots. The first is, Pat, I'm going to go to you. And I like the way you took a shot at the town council. I like that. Which, by the way, is your client. No. How many meetings did you have with the town council? Or the executives? In terms of 2 beaches you're already working on and downstairs.
How many meetings?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to get at the point on transparency. You have a lot of people in the room right now that are finding out about this in the last 2 weeks, and that includes myself. And, I had some folks, friends that have educated me on this. And by the way, I'm right up front. I fully expect the leadership, the town council, and the vendor, whatever I'm sorry if I used the wrong terminology, to be as forthright on how it impacts us. Alex, I appreciate the civil engineering class, but we don't need that for tonight. All right. There's a lot of us here that are upset because we didn't know what was going on. And my feeling is, and I asked the question earlier of Al, is why are we, okay, now we're gonna do the environmental study. So where I'm coming from, this cake is already baked. And there are city councilmen, ones in this room, that has quote unquote said deal is done. And the deal is done, then just say it. And the final question I'll ask you, and I'll ask you folks and any city council person or state, Al, if there's enough pushback, which I think you're gonna get a lot of it, what are the chances of you guys dropping eminent domain on this project?
I think, sir, the first thing I want to say is,
Well, you're the relationship manager, but
yeah,
somebody in here can comment on that.
sure. So, I just gotta say, first of all, you got 13 town councilors who are volunteers, who are all good people. Yes, we have reached out.
But don't mislead us.
We do.
You also did not have a town councilor until just
You do now.
recently.
You do now.
You do know.
Just recently, he was elected.
Yes, sir.
And at the beginning of this year, we did not have a town councilor representing Osterville.
I'm gonna let town councilor Cusack say something. Hey, howdy, Stephen. I'm Paul Cusack, and I'm certain I've met all of you folks, so it seems like the conversation has turned to the town council portion of things, and so I'd be happy to take questions. I know we started a question, it sounded like back here, but I'm open up to talk about any aspect of this that folks want to talk about. So I'm gonna just start on the left. Hey.
Good evening.
Hey.
Well, I live on Washington Ave.
All right.
Have you personally made a decision on this project yourself?
No, I have not. Do you feel like that's disingenuous?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, it is interesting.
You-
How do you vote?
Party in
Yeah.
August
Right.
6th specifically, and you shared with our neighbors that this was a done deal.
That's amazing that now, and
I did say that.
you did say that.
I did it to you, first.
Yeah, you said, but you also just said that I said that to you. I had,
No, you didn't say it, mate. I told you, no, I told you over coffee that you met with the men's club.
right,
You met somewhere else. The done deal.
people are calling it a done
I
deal.
don't know.
You,
No,
you were.
Wow, I think that's transference, and we'll get to your question. Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah.
I did write on the thing that I don't speak, so can I speak before you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm Susie McLean, a Cape Cod artist. This is so stilted, sorry. Living in Osterville, Barnstable. My husband and I have owned our house in Osterville since 1980 and have lived here for the last 33 years. As an artist, I have painted Dowses Beach hundreds of times. In fact, I call it my outdoor studio, as I often paint on plein air. I was heartbroken to hear a rumor that Dowses Beach was under threat by developers called AVANGRID developers and Commonwealth Wind. The best way to discourage dialogue and dissent to plans that affect us is to spread misinformation saying that the AVANGRID project is a done deal, done and dusted. In fact, it is not a done deal at all, as we have come to learn. On a personal note, I bring up our block party on August 6th on David Street in Osterville. Catherine just brought it up. She owns a shop in Osterville, Bella of Cape Cod. Anyway, so we had about 50 friends and neighbors, kind of a potluck event that we have held every summer for many, many years. A candidate for town council, Paul Cusack, came to campaign at our party. He spoke to lots of us and presented our concerns. When we presented our concerns about Dowses, we got the impression it was a done deal. I was upset that there had been no transparency with the residents and that this industrial sized project would adversely affect all the wildlife, fish, birds that live on Dowses Beach and the two bays and the Centerville River coming into East Bay. Dowses Beach is a generationally iconic place for the old, the young, the vitamin D deprived residents of Osterville and Barnstable. It is perhaps the best place I've been to in my life to experience beauty and tranquility. Can we afford to let this happen? I'm wondering why with so little benefit for wildlife, the residents, and the environment, that our beloved Dowses is being sacrificed to AVANGRID Commonwealth, a for-profit.
Go on the list, Peter Hansen.
All right, thank you. I don't need it. Do you mind for the Zoom folks for me, Pete?
Peter Hansen, Osterville resident, OVA member. And this, I got two short questions, yes or no answers if we can. A couple of meetings back at OVA, a friend of mine, Jack Griffin, spoke after you got done with your presentation. In fact, can we put up the permitting process for a minute? This came up after your presentation on all the permitting that has to be done here. My friend Jack Griffith asked you yes or no. Can AVANGRID bypass, no matter what the results are on these studies, can AVANGRID bypass all the permitting and go forward, yes or no?
Bypass all that permitting?
Yes or no?
No,
You said yes last time.
no,
John, yes, right? You did.
no, but hold on a minute. Because I think I think you might have taken my answer out of, look at the permitting. One of them, for example, is the siting board. There's no override to that. We have to get siting board approval.
Let me back up. What permits can you override and go forward?
We can't override any
You didn't
permits.
say that before.
Hold on, give me a second here. The Energy Facilities Siting Board has the authority to override. It is not our intention to ask them to do so. Our intention
They
is,
could, so.
they could, that exists in the law. That's not something we made up or are asking for. That is a law. And it's intended to make sure that critical energy facilities can get built, and we can all quibble or we can argue about whether that's a good law or not. That law exists. What we've said is our desire is to go through this entire permitting process, including the town permits, all the approvals, notwithstanding the fact that there is this power that exists. It's not our intention to use it. We want to work with the town. We want to give value to everyone in this project.
But if you run into a roadblock, you can go around it.
The law allows that, yes.
Second, yes or no, please. Does AVANGRID currently have a contract with the utilities?
Yes. It needs a renegotiation, but we currently have a signed contract.
But you haven't, it needs renegotiation.
Yes.
So it's not a valid contract.
No, it's a valid contract. It's signed. It's at the DPU pending approval.
Pending approval.
Which is the process it goes through. For this particular type of contracts, you sign the contracts with the utilities, and then it goes to the Department of Public Utilities for approval.
Are you on hold now for 6 months? Is that correct?
No.
What's the timetable?
I don't know when the DPU will make a decision. We are talking about a very small price increase with the state.
What's small?
It'll be so small that it would, first of all, this project will save money for every ratepayer in this room. Yes, it will.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to tell you more about that. The net effect of the price increase we're looking for is about 30 cents a month compared to National Grid, which just announced a $115 a month electric utility rate. The price of this contract is about half of what Eversource charges for basic service. And this project will be the third least expensive offshore wind project in the country, even with the small price increase that we're looking for. Happy to, I know this is really about permitting. If you want to know more about why we're seeking the price increase, I can tell you that, but that's the status.
All right, thank you.
Before you sit down, could I ask one quick question? I believe you said that this project would service 750,000 homes. Is that correct?
700.
I think we said 700,000.
700,000 homes. And so when you say the project, is that only your project that would service that many homes?
Actually, only the Commonwealth Wind project, because if you add the other two projects, Vineyard Wind, which we own half of, and
Yes.
Park City, which we own all of, it's much more than 700,000.
And so how much is that?
If you add them all three,
Yes.
1.5 million homes.
So in other words, what you're saying is this project is going to service every home in Massachusetts, basically.
No, I think there's one, I think
Really?
there's, wait, I think there's 1.5 to 2 million homes in Massachusetts.
2.9 million.
2.9. So this project's not going to serve all of those homes.
So 75%. So Little Cape Cod is going to service electricity for almost the whole state of Massachusetts. Is that correct?
No,
No. Okay.
no, that, I just don't agree with that math. I'm not being disrespectful.
Well, let me say this to you. If you said, again, how many homes is that?
This
Altogether?
project, 700. If
Yeah.
you add the other two projects.
Yes,
$1.5 million,
yes,
I think Pat,
About
but
half, be about half, or there are about 2.9 million homes in the, yeah.
about half.
okay, so. Okay, there's 7 million people in the state of Massachusetts, and I don't think your math is right.
Well, the 7 million.
If you take each home and times 4 people, the average probably in each home.
I'll tell you what, I think rather than argue about it, I'd be happy to take your email address and I'll give you the numbers and our citations for them.
What about the homes outside of Massachusetts on the New England ISO? So you add up.
Sue Connolly.
Actually, why don't, all right, why don't you just finish up this question, Ken?
Can you ask it again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm just curious because the power is also gonna go into the New England grid or the New England ISO, right? So the man isolated the Massachusetts homes, but there's also, I believe, homes in Connecticut and other places that would benefit from it. Is that correct?
Yes, but I want to be clear, we had Justice here at one of our hearings a couple weeks ago, and he made or maybe a month ago, he made a really good point. Electricity goes in the path of least resistance. And most of the actual electrons from these projects will end up going to Cape Cod and Boston because of the transmission network. That is the path of least resistance. It will go into the overall New England grid. Most of the electrons will be here and in Boston. And I should say, for an area that's had bottlenecks, that's had reliability problems, that's another benefit of this project. These electrons are basically going to Cape Cod.
So are you supplementing the existing supply of electricity in the state of Massachusetts? Are you replacing the capacity that is in place?
Okay, folks, people signed up. There are a lot of people who have questions, so
I'll get
he can, if you want to quickly answer that, but then I really want to make sure everyone has a chance. And so I would appreciate people not calling out, because I will go down the list and then we'll go to the online, and I'll try to make sure that everyone gets a chance to talk. So you have a quick question, answer for that, or would you rather follow up later?
It's up, whatever you like.
Okay, we'll follow up later. John Cizon, Cizon. John?
No.
No.
Is that
Yeah. Oh,
First, I want to really direct this towards you, Alex, being that you're with EVO, which is Environmental Protection. And there was a study done, and I'll refer to it here, presented in October 23rd, 2020. It's titled Offshore Wind Transmission Analysis of New England and New York Offshore Wind Integration. It is presented by a man named Johannes Pfeifenberger from the Brattle Group, who has a long history of experience in wholesale power market design, renewable energy, electricity storage and transmission. He's also a senior fellow at Boston University Institute of Sustained Energy, visiting scholar at MIT Center for Energy and Environmental Policy, blah, blah, blah. He has a long history of dealing with transmission issues. And I believe he's also he's an advocate of wind power, as many of us are. What I would like to present here is that first, this is done in 2020 in October, so it's about a year and a half old, a little over. And what they did was they took a study of these wind power transmission lines landing in both New York and New England. And at that time, they had already contracted 3,112 megawatts of power. And that there were total commitments of 5,900 megawatts of power. The potential needed by 2050 by New England is 25 to 40,000 megawatts. So first, this is not the only project they're talking about. Now we're talking about, which is nice, they talk about where they're going to through a corridor through Nantucket Sound. But in general, if you look at the map of, and I'll share this with you, this will be on the OBA, Osterville OBA Today website. But this is maybe you can't see this, but I'll explain it. This is the approach where they let the generator of these lines, which is the AVANGRID of these things, versus What would happen if the state used a planned approach about where these lines would go? So what now is happening now is AVANGRID is going to separate communities, negotiating with them, negotiating with separate state offices about where the lines can go. This advocates for a all-in-one approach, a planned approach for those lines to go. And they did a study in this picture about where the lines would go from this project, and there's a total of 17 lines that I can count going through Nantucket Sound and toward the state of Rhode Island. With a planned approach, there'd be 3 consolidated lines that would do the same thing. What I'm getting at is that your environmental protection, this is for wind power, which is environmentally friendly, but why are you doing it in an environmentally insensitive way? As talking about state authorities, why aren't you forcing all these different companies that are coming in to come through one coordinated spot, or not 2 or 3 coordinated spots, instead of allowing them to go to all these pristine beaches and little towns and digging those towns up? Okay. Let me also. When we're talking about generated lead line approach, developers develop incremental amounts of offshore wind generation with specific project generated lead lines. The alternative approach, the planned approach for offshore transmission and onshore grid upgrades, are planned to minimize overall risk and cost of achieving offshore wind and clean energy goals. This will be quick, I'm not going to go off too much longer. But they talked about what the benefits of the planned approach would be. And those were lower overall costs both in New York, in New England and New York for all these projects, substantially lower onshore costs and slightly higher offshore costs, losses over offshore transmissions or reduced losses. But one of the things I was noticing here is that impact of fisheries and environment are substantially lower impacts with going with this type of project, substantially lower. Because they're not going all over like spaghetti through the Nantucket Sound. One more thing here. They also talked about the comparison of total length of undersea transmission under both approaches. Under the generator landline approach, there'd be almost 1,620 miles of undersea bed digging up and placing those lines. But under the plan approach, it'd be half that, 831 miles. Not only will it be cheaper for all involved in the state, the federal government, and your companies, it would be better for our environment. Okay, but the bottom line here is that why are we doing clean energy in a dirty way?
Yes.
This is from today's newspaper in Providence from USA Today Network. Rhode Island utilities regulators are considering suspending Mayflower Wind's application for transmission cables that would run up the Seconic River to the former site of Brayton Power Point Station in Somerset after the developer raised questions about the financial viability of the first phases of the $5 billion offshore wind project it has proposed in Massachusetts. And the State Energy Facility Siting Board has ordered the company to demonstrate why the proceedings shouldn't be stayed until the questions are answered. Doesn't that open a lot of power if that does not go through for that to be another site to be rebid for this project and other projects? Maybe it doesn't, but it's just I'm just wondering. But it seems like we're like I said, we're trying to do something in a good for the environment in the worst possible way.
Appreciate that. Yeah, we will. I believe the ENF address that approach to some extent. From their perspective, and I think it was something for the other projects we have asked them to look at again. I anticipate we were asked them to provide a detailed response to that because yeah, obviously it's an alternative that would minimize impacts. So,
and one more thing, I'm sorry to interrupt, but they talked about going to Brayton, the other landing spot. There was nothing on Cape Cod. Okay, and they took all these lines and all the power in 2020 that was needed at the time. And they found ways to do it without having 15 different projects digging up the ocean floor at the same time. This doesn't make any environmental sense. So let's do it smart and clean all the way, not just out at the wind turbines themselves, but when you're coming offshore.
Jim O'Leary.
Jim O'Leary?
Right here. Came out of the cave. About those growings. First of all, thank you for your time and the information. My understanding is this is the first major commercial wind farm in the United States. Is that correct? No?
No, Vineyard Wind 1 is the first
Okay.
major commercial wind farm.
So what's happening here has a lot more to do than just douses and coal, has greater implications. I guess the question in my mind was, other than Councilor Cusack, who's here taking some arrows, where is Congressman Keating? Where is Senator Sear? Where is Representative Diggs? I know you can't answer that question, but I think they should be here or at some point. Here in this room. And the other thing I would say is I've had conversations with Councilor Cusack. He's an honorable individual. I haven't heard him say it's a done deal, but I have heard him say, I'm not saying that didn't happen. I'm just saying what I've heard from him is that this is being controlled by the Biden administration, federal government, has the support of Governor Baker, has the support of all our elected officials. And I don't see any of them here. So I think we need to have more representation from our elected officials so that they're feeling what we're feeling in this room this evening. I agree. And I think the idea around Barnstable High is a great idea. This is crazy.
Thank you. Is there anyone online? Yeah, we'll do a Zoom one next. So Steve, can you introduce, is there anybody who'd like to speak on Zoom?
Thanks, Pat. We have a couple written Q&As, which I will voice. Coming from Lauren Catapon, is it fair to expect the ENF to include all the aspects of the yet to be filed EIR?
You want to answer that, Alex?
Could you repeat that, please? I didn't catch the beginning.
Is it fair to expect the ENF to include all the aspects of the yet to be filed EIR?
I'm not sure exactly what you mean, but sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. That's why there's a 3-stage process. So, I think part of what we will do is potentially ask them to look at things they have not looked at. So in that sense, it wasn't covered in the ENF, I guess, but I'm not sure if that answers your question, but we will, ask them to evaluate additional alternatives, additional impacts, additional mitigation measures, answer these comments. So I guess, we intend to sort of build on, through the draft EIRs will build on the ENF, and the final EIR will build on the draft EIR. So hopefully it'll be a pretty comprehensive review of the project by then. Anyone else?
Well, why don't we do another in person, and then Steve, get someone ready for Zoom next.
Zenas Crocker?
Zenas Crocker, Barnstable Clean Water Coalition. Show of hands, how many actually know who I am or what we do at Barnstable Clean Water Coalition? That's terrific. Lots of you don't actually know who we are or what we do. Right down the street, right on the right, we have an office. Come see me if you want to talk about clean water and what we're doing. I believe there's still a lot of questions about wind power and what's going on. But I think that we owe it to ourselves, to our families, especially to our children, to entertain and look at what this means going forward. This is a lot more than Dowsett Beach, okay? I do a lot of work on sea level rise. And I'll tell you what, pretty little secret, Dowsett Beach is gone.
Yeah.
So is Craigville Beach. So are all the beaches on the South Shore. By the turn of the century, 65% of the beaches in California are gone. So you know what? We actually all have a place to work ahead for the future for those children that are born and unborn. And that's going to mean we all have to give something. It doesn't mean we have to give up. It doesn't mean we roll over. It doesn't mean we try to get the best possible deal we can. And I don't know whether it's a fait accompli or not. I agree the federal government wants this to happen. Okay. I look at Europe And I know that in Denmark, over 65% of their power comes from wind power. Okay, here, it's far less than a fraction of 1% at this point. And we have to do more to control the climate. A lady stood up and said 70% of the power is in fact hydropower. Well, you know what? The glaciers are going to be gone in a short 50 years. There will be no hydropower from the glaciers that are happening, okay? And this is the tragedy of what's going on. This is reality, sir. This is really what's going on. So what I want to say, excuse me, ma'am.
It doesn't involve.
Well, let me make a couple of other points, if I may. I work on clean water. I grew up here. My family's been from here for a long time. When I grew up here, there was actually eelgrass by Dowses Beach. It's gone. There is no eelgrass along this whole stretch of coastline. Why? Because all of us have been polluting for a long period of time. That's why I'm supportive of doing what we can to accelerate municipal treatment. The sewer line will be disruptive coming down Osterville for about 2 years, but then it helps clean up the water. It's about a third of the wastewater. I calculated in 10 years, we could save 500 million gallons of wastewater from going into Nantucket Sound, from going into the Three Bays area. And I think that's pretty critical. I think that's important. Now, a round of applause for Sue Connolly, because I couldn't get this many people out to care about clean water, but you did for a story that Dowses Beach is going to be destroyed, which I don't believe is true. And that's where my problem is. Where was the Save Centerville, Craigville Beach? Where was Save Coville's Beach? Where were those groups? They weren't here. So when I look at this plan and I look at it going underground, where is it? Excuse me?
All right, go next. Do you have a question?
No, I'm just asking the question. Where were those groups? So I'm just trying to understand.
All right. Talk about glaciers, okay?
Excuse me. I really want to, we have 20 minutes left before the library wants to close. We can hopefully go a little longer. I want to have questions directed to the proponent here, the project company, whatever is a better word. And so anyway,
I'm right
there's
down
one
the
more
street. My
question.
door is always open.
Okay, Adam Myron. Adam Myron is the last speaker who signed up, so then I will try to get as many people who raise their hand as possible.
Hey guys, I'm Adam Myron, a year-round resident, got young kids, and all the time at Dowses. I also have a big background in electricity. I spent 23 years working in electricity, bringing a lot of projects to market, so I know this stuff. Interesting points, right? Basically, they said they didn't do the studies to figure out which other substations to go into. So they've got to come into Barnstable, right? You've got the long-term contract, you've got the fishing corridor, and you know you have to come in, which means the tax revenue is coming anyways if the project gets built. The question is where it's going to come into Barnstable, right? So that's number one. Number two, peak demand in New England's about 30,000 megawatts, right? So it's not just homes, residences, it's also industry and office towers in Boston. So this is a sizable project, and I'm an environmentalist. I'm definitely pro-green. I'd like to see the project get built. I just don't know that going through Dowses is the right answer. I look around, there's a couple of substations that look like, you have multiple ways to get there. So, yeah, that's what I kind of put back to the town council saying, yeah, the sewage and water cleanup is a great idea. We want that, but you have to come in through the beach. Could you go into a Hannah's Harbor? Could you go in, on the backside? Are there other things you could do? I'm also curious which private landowners, have been approached about, maybe you raise a couple of $10 million mansions and build a substation somewhere else.
All right.
Hi, how are you? So we're not buying what you're selling. There's so many endangered species that need to be protected. A man the other day told me he saw a huge turtle swimming right where we all are. There's just no excuse for this. I mean, the town will be destroyed. I saw what they did over at Craigville. They blow up the beach, huge pipelines go in. What you don't know is it's not green. There's oil in these pipes. Can you imagine one little oil spill? They're not really talking about that, are they? That would destroy Dowses. It would destroy Craigville. I just drove around town. The beaches, the water level, what he's saying is true. You all know in the winter, there have been days you can't even get onto Dowses because the water level has risen so much, you can't even get there. Talk to people who live there. Right now, the water level, I went to each bay is so high right now. I've never seen it that high. We are predicted to be in the worst climate disasters of our life. Offshore wind has never been tested against hurricanes. They use plastics, petrochemicals, steel, cement. They have to destroy our environment to make them. There's nothing green about this. Our taxes will go up. Our endangered species, I saw them drill. My heart broke right by the osprey nest this summer. And the osprey went crazy trying to protect her babies. And there they drilled a hole. I saw them drill a hole 10 feet from wetlands. The whole back of Dowses is wetlands. Why is that not being protected? Why? It just blows my mind. We're not buying what you're selling. We're gonna fight you. We're gonna fight you on the beaches. Yes, about children are military. We're gonna fight you on the sand. These emit EMFs. How do you like sitting on a nice sandy beach that's emitting EMFs? The color of the sand actually changed color. I went to check on it a month ago at Cobbles in Craigville. It's a different color where they put the huge cable in. I mean, like, there's so many questions that we're not buying what you're selling. We're going to fight you on the beaches. We're going to fight you on the oceans. We're going to protect our sea life that some people may not be protecting who are supposed to be protecting it. When I called the Center for Coastal Studies, where is she from? Galveston, Texas. When did you get that job? A year ago. Okay, the most polluted body of water is supposed to be protecting our right whales. So I don't know what's going on here. Town council meetings are not open to the public. My friends in Hinnegg are like, that's illegal. Like, we have to Zoom and half the population can't Zoom. I mean, you tell me what's going on with that. How is that being allowed? Conservation Commission, closed meetings also, Zoom. So I don't know what's going on here, but we're going to fight you. We're going to protect our sea life, our endangered species. If you're not going to, we're going to protect our wetlands. We're going to protect our beaches. We're going to protect our sand. We're going to protect our downtown. We're going to protect our businesses. A man in Craigville at Centerville said, my business suffered over at Craigville. And so we're going to fight you on every single level. My question is, how dumb do you think we are? Yes, we're polite, and yes, we're nice, but we are not going to lie down and let you rape our town, our beaches, our sea life, our oceans for our children, for our grandchildren. And I would really like to know on a more legal level, yes, that's emotional. This is our quality of life. We're going to fight you for our quality of life. We're going to protect our downtown businesses. Guess who's going into that nice preserved building that just shut down? A developer downtown Osterville. Okay, so we're going to be what? Filled with developers? We're going to protect what we have. So my question is this, exactly legally, let's think legally now, where are we in the permitting process? We know you don't have your permits. We know you're renegotiating your contracts. I would like to know exactly, besides the fact, how dumb do you think we are? Where are you exactly in the permitting process? Because it will make our protests a lot easier if we know.
So, ma'am, this is a list of all the permits we have to get. We've started the MEPA process. That's the environmental notification form that we're here tonight to talk about. We filed the Department of Public Utilities Energy Facility Siting Board, but that's a long way from completion. We just filed it. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't believe we filed for any of these other permits. So we have a long way to go.
Can we get a list of exactly what permits are needed, where you are in the permitting process, and who gives the permits?
Well, these are the permits. Hold on. These are the permits we need. They're all up on the slide. What?
It's to the
It's in there.
And where are we in that permitting process?
As I said, the first one, the MIPA one at the top, we filed our environmental notification form to kick off this process. The second one, Department of Public Utilities Energy Facility Siting Board, we filed it. It's going to be quite some time before it's resolved. And all of these other permits, we have not filed them yet.
So nothing's been approved. So
Correct.
we're going to protest you on every level possible.
Go to town.
We will.
Okay, can we take a Zoom question next? So Steve, queue up the next person for Zoom, please.
Bernadette Haynes, I'm going to allow you to speak, but please be sure to unmute yourself on your end.
Oh, hello. Back to my initial question. Can you describe what the beach is going to look like during construction? What type of structures will be there? And how long do you anticipate they will be there?
And you want to take this?
Sure, I can take that.
And say who you are.
Ken, it's Cheryl Stantek, consulting engineer working with AVANGRID. During construction, again, it will be over the winter months. Each of the directional drills that Mark had referred to will basically consist of a drill rig. If you've ever seen an artesian well being drilled, which is basically just a vertical drill bit that goes into the earth, it's basically the same process, except the drill bit is going into the earth at about 12 or 15 degree angle. The process of the drilling utilizes drilling fluid to stabilize the hole, carry away cuttings and whatnot. And because of that, local to each of the drill areas, there'll be a series of about 6 to 8 supplemental skids and water tanks that will filter the water slurry mixture, separate the solids, separate the fluids for trucking on site. So again, it's going to be a drill rig with about 6 to 8 supplemental skids that go along with it. And again, they'll only be there during the construction months. And at the end of the day, after construction is complete, what will remain is the 3 joint bays, each with roughly a 3x3 manway for future access if needed.
Ken, can you clarify, this is all in the parking lot, not in the
Yes,
beach?
sir.
He was asking what's on the beach.
Oh, on the beach, I'm sorry, nothing. There's nothing at the beach. All of the construction work takes place in the paved parking areas of Dowsett.
All right.
Yes, sir.
You're not going to be doing the construction during the summer, but what does that really mean? Does that mean that the parking lot is still going to be closed or is going to be open? Or
During
are
the
you going
summer?
to have a chain link fence around it like the Cobbles? Because that was closed this summer.
No.
But it said me, so that-
Yeah, no, Cobbles was open. It was the lot was totally repaid before Memorial Day. It was open fully. They started construction again, I think in October. There was.
You're saying there'll be no impact of parking. on the-
No, but we will repave.
Stored there.
It will all be removed, but for each summer season, the 2-year construction cycle for that, between the summer between, we will repave the lot before Memorial Day. The lot will be fully open, max capacity with no changes for the summer season. I want to defer to Alexander. Any other? Hey, ma'am, go ahead.
So you're saying that it's a 2-year construction cycle with summers off. And I know Ken, you mentioned earlier that, the work that's being done in and around Barnstable has not been disruptive, or you guys are looking to do it in the least disruptive manner. I mean, this is a disaster right now, right? I mean, it's an absolute disaster, and I guess, when I think about what would happen to have that exact scenario go through all of Main Street and Weano Ave for 2 years, that pretty much shuts down our town. And diverts a ton of traffic from local businesses, et cetera. I can't envision how that is a non-disruptive option.
If I said non-disruptive, I apologize. It's not non-disruptive. There is a temporary disruption. That is a real thing. These lines do move at approximately 100 to 200 feet per day. So it's not like it's a disruption in front of your house or your business for a long period of time. We move down the road expeditiously, but there will be a disruption. I guess the way we're trying to think about this is we're trying to compensate, first of all, the town with host community fees that go well beyond what we pay in taxes. We're trying to facilitate and expedite the sewering of those roadways to bring water quality benefits to the town. We've also, with Cobble Beach and Craigsville, we've also worked with neighbors on some specific local community benefits, which is something, by the way, we're continue to be eager to sit down and talk to this community about. So you're right, there will be some temporary disruption. What we would hope is that the long-term benefits, especially the water quality benefits, outweigh the temporary disruption.
Do you mind if we do another Zoom? All right, so Steve, next person on Zoom, please.
Debbie Barlow, I'm going to unmute you, but please be sure to unmute yourself on your side.
Hi, yes, thank you. So beginning to end, the time you break ground at Douse's until you're completely out of there, what time frame? What are we looking at dates? And second question, full disclosure, what is in this profit-wise for AVANGRID?
I'll do the profit one and then someone else can handle the construction dates. So when we originally bid this project back in September, we bid it at a very, very low rate, one of the lowest rates for a power purchase agreement for offshore wind in the country. And it was a healthy return given the risk. That was in September of 2021. Since we did that bid, we've had the worst inflation in 40 years. We had the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which wreaked havoc on steel and other key commodities that we need. And we've seen the Federal Reserve raise interest rates by 4%, which anyone who takes out a loan for a mortgage knows the interest rate is a very critical piece of the overall cost. So that has really driven down whatever profit margin existed. And that's why we are talking to the state about renegotiating the contract. Now, you also asked about construction schedule.
Right. Thanks. The construction schedule for the horizontal directional drills, HDDs, overall will encompass approximately 10 to 14 weeks over the winter months.
I guess just how roughly we may be talking fall 2025, maybe late fall 2025. It really is subject to the negotiation with the town on the possibility of sewer. If we were to collaborate with the town on sewer, they need to go first because the sewer line goes farther deep. So that will get further refined as we have discussions with your town manager, Mark Ells, about that. And if the town does want to do the sewer collaboration or not. But I'd say roughly we're talking of probably fall 25 to spring 26, and then probably again the next year, fall 26 to spring 27, subject to change. We're probably talking about that 2-year cycle.
It was over 3 years at Craigsville Falls. We went over there every day.
Oh man, it started in the fall of 21. It hasn't been 3 years now.
Well, that's a quick question.
Alex?
Yeah,
Larry?
just a question on that schedule. That schedule was made public. And I think you're being a little bit optimistic about disruptions, because it's not just during the construction period. Okay, right now the roads through Centerville are ridiculous. You can't go anywhere. So I think that's kind of an optimistic statement. Now, and I don't know if it's Park City Wind or Commonwealth Wind, but one of the projects, the power is going to Connecticut. Am I correct?
Okay. In the Park City Wind project, the power is under contract to Connecticut, and they receive what's called a renewable energy credit. It's kind of like a good housekeeping stamp of approval. It's kind of like we're buying clean energy, and they're under contract, and their contract is giving us the financial backstop we need to build it. So in a sense, contractually, yes, but the laws of physics are what they are, and electricity flows in the path of least resistance. So it turns out, and this is something that our engineer talked about a few months ago, turns out that most of those electrons will actually power Barnstable homes and businesses and Boston, because that's just the way the electricity flows.
We have a contract with Connecticut Power Company.
I know it seems odd. It's because they are trying to meet their climate goals, And they are causing, because of their contract, a project that otherwise wouldn't exist to exist, because that contract gives us the financial backstop. So they get the bragging rights, they get the renewable energy credits, and they can say to their citizens, we caused this 800 megawatt project to come into existence because of our contract. We're going to take the climate credit for it.
Right.
And we are technically putting 800 megawatts into the grid that will go as electricity flows through wires. There would be a way to get it to Connecticut. We could do what's called an HD line directly to Connecticut, and then they would get all the power, but that would be costly and unnecessary for the purposes that they want, which is to be the people who make this project happen.
And one follow-up question. The horizontal directional drill, right? None of us here are engineers or anything. I'm speaking, right? But if you could give us better information and drawings of what actually that process is.
Yeah.
Okay, and I think there's a few other things, because we all don't know what you know. And I think if we had better, clearer information, it might help the process.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Bob Schulte from Senegal. Question for you. I think you've alluded to it previously, that you've asked for renegotiations with the electric utilities. I don't know if a lot of people in the room know that the DPU and the utilities have said no to the renegotiation. These were contracts were signed 6 months ago. Some of the things that they've talked about, the utility, the natural gas price increases, steel, et cetera, were already in the works prior to these contracts being signed. My question is this, and I understand there's still some uncertainty, but if the DPU and the utilities continue to say no to the renegotiation of these contracts, you've said to your investors, and I've listened to the investor calls, that this is a financially not viable project. If those parties refuse to renegotiate, I know you're optimistic that you can force the politicos to do this, but if they don't, will you walk away from this project is the first question. And secondly, in the same investor conference call, you told the investors that you need to look at the Park City and the Commonwealth as a single project to be financially viable. I guess as a Senegal resident, I worry about what will happen if this project doesn't go forward. What's going to happen with the Park City? Because you've already said to investors you need to do both of those to make this financially viable.
Okay, so that was fine. The first thing I think you asked was, would we walk away if we don't get the price increase? That's a question for the AVANGRID Board of Directors, not for me. So I don't even have the authority to answer that, even if I had an answer. So that is just a question I can't answer. The second thing you said, though, I want to be clear, the DPU has not said no to the price increase. The DPU said we don't want to suspend this proceeding to allow the parties to negotiate. They have not ruled on whether a price increase is valid or not. It was purely procedural. And as for the utilities, we're talking to the outgoing administration and the incoming administration. If you look at the law that governs this, it's not all just up to the utilities. This is a public interest project to transition to clean energy, and the utilities are not the final word on this. So we will find a way to find a path forward to make this project economically viable. And I believe that once the utilities really hear our information and the facts supporting it, and the fact that our prices are way lower than theirs, way lower, they'll have no justifiable basis to deny ratepayers and consumers the benefits of this project.
You also, the joining of the project.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm always bad at compound questions because I get carried away and then I forget the third part of it. One of the advantages of this project, and one of the reasons we were able to offer at such low prices, is the synergy of doing them both together. There's many different economies of scale that are locked in. So we do see them as joined at the hip. We want to go forward with both of them. And our intent is to renegotiate with both the state of Massachusetts and the state of Connecticut.
We'll do another Zoom, if that's all right, Alex. Go ahead.
Follow up on that. So when you talk about lower rates, are you talking about versus fully loaded transmission and distribution, or just wholesale? Or are you stripping out the overheads? Are you looking at fully loaded cost? Because I'm really skeptical that with the OREX included, that you're actually cheaper than that.
Oh, I can show you the documents. I'm talking about the levelized cost of energy from our project compared to, for example,
The
what?
OREX are not included.
Right,
The
compared-
OREX are the big subs. That's the difference. So if we take the OREX out, you have to put OREX plus energy cost.
It's still way lower. Yep, I'll be happy to send you the information.
Online. Okay, we'll do a Zoom, Steve, if you can queue up the next person.
Yeah, Scott McKeon, I'm gonna give you permissions. Please be sure to unmute yourself.
Hi, I assume you meant Scott McLean and couldn't read my writing. In any event, I grew up in Osterville. I've spent countless hours at Dowses Beach. Used to walk there all the time. I live in Marston's Mills. I've spent 67 of my 68 years in Barnstable. I still find my way to Dowses once a week or so. So I've heard from some of the folks at the meeting about potential downsides of this project. I think that the upsides are way larger than the downsides. To me, it's a no-brainer. I, for one, would feel happier on my walks at Dowses, knowing that that Osterville and Dowses and those of us who've lived there are playing a role in saving countless lives around the world in the future due to climate change. But also many lives now, given that an estimated 200,000 Americans per year die prematurely from air pollution. I think my parents, part of the greatest generation who made such huge sacrifices to win World War II, are rolling over in their graves at the unwillingness of some people to make some small, relatively small sacrifices for the greater good. I bet that you would find that the vast majority of Barnstable residents support this project. So please, what?
Sorry, sir, continue.
Please, to the developers of this project, keep up the good work. To the Barnstable Town Councilors, keep up the good work. To Zenas Crocker and his crew, keep up the good work. You are doing the right thing for humanity, for the town of Barnstable, and even though they don't know it, to everybody in Osterville, especially to their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Thank you.
Next. So it's after 8 o'clock. When it gets people who haven't asked a question yet, go ahead.
I just actually had a question for Councilman Cusack. Could you just let us know what's actually been voted on?
Oh, yeah, sure.
And like, where does that stand and what information did you have and I just don't have a sense of what you actually voted.
Yeah, so what, in our last town council meeting, which would be 2 weeks ago tomorrow night, the town council did vote 13-0, I think. Somebody threw out that stat, to authorize the town manager, Mark Ells, to enter into formal negotiations with the AVANGRID representatives here, to work towards writing a host community agreement, which stipulates effectively quite a number of things we've discussed tonight in regards to property taxes, fees, other community benefits. And the conversation about community benefits really hasn't even started yet. And there's quite a number. I find, and I sort of concur with the last person who was calling in, I did say that I hadn't, quote unquote, made my mind up yet, right? But that's because of some material differences than really the situation that we found ourselves in, for instance, earlier this summer or fall. And things have changed in regards to some of the economics on the macro level, in regards to the availability of steel in the war in Ukraine and things like that. And so there's some things, right, that give me pause, that could be about a potential recession drawn by inflation or something like that. And I just don't want the town and our village in particular to be, caught holding a bag with something that just is never going to come to fruition. But like Jim O'Leary said when he stepped out from the cave earlier, there are certain aspects of our present sort of political moment where it does seem that there is political will that would probably drive towards maintaining the efforts to hit targets in regards to decarbonizing our overall economy, both on the state and federal level. And I think we've seen that sort of across both parties. So even though there are material differences today with the project and when I was first getting to know it, I do feel like the overall momentum is towards trying to create two huge I think, large national and regional victories in regards to greater American energy independence, as well as more localized decarbonization of our consumption of fossil fuels. So those things, I just feel like there is a forward lead in that direction, but you got to take into account a bunch of the other things. So I think the best next step was to authorize our town manager to do something that he's got some practice in, which is negotiating with these firms to write a host community agreement, in which I think they've taken a year or two to complete. So they're not something that is about to be done. And in fact, I don't think the first conversations even happened. And we're going to have to go through a process similar to this to collect ideas about what could possibly go into the host community agreement. I think the folks at AVANGRID have been open about hey, we got to do some loss mitigation stuff if we're going to have an impact on businesses. The other two lines, right, they did not go through dense commercial corridors. This will be a denser commercial corridor. We have to take that into mind. So we're going to end up hopefully coming up in a negotiation on something like that through, I would say, I've got a running list. I'm psyched to get ideas to add to the list. There's 20 or 30. They could be, plug-in stations down at the beach. It could be about new sidewalks. It could be about our park here in the village, that we're sort of in a state where it's sort of like some progress was made, but then it stopped. And those things are on the table for potential discussion with AVANGRID. If we didn't give authorization to the town council, to the town manager Els, to pursue these conversations, as they go through that long list, which I think is about 19 different steps on the permitting that we've seen a couple of times tonight, as we get further and further and further, honestly, their negotiating power goes up and up and up, and we don't have a chance to sort of steal in, I think, relatively great advantages for the village and the town. And unfortunately, it falls to state folks to effectively be the lead talker on our behalf. And instead, the HCA is this opportunity for us to actually get serious questions answered about the details that we've been discussing tonight, as well as to come up with the community benefits, which I think are substantial.
Can I just ask a question? The whole vibe of that answer, though, feels like this is happening. So what can the community get in return?
What about your constituents?
As opposed to
who say no?
Should it be happening? So I don't know. And I mean, it really has been the signs on the neighbors' lawns that have created the awareness, so like, how do we get ahead of that? So we're not finding out because someone found out and decided to inform the town versus.
Would you please open up the town meetings to fair and equitable debate about that? Would you please do that? I mean, it's a legal part in the Constitution, freedom of speech. Would you please do that?
I'm pretty sure that the whole Zoomification of the town. I didn't answer the question. Yeah, okay.
Would you please lead the charge in that? We'll put our responsibility here. Thank you.
What to say on that? So there's one or two wrinkles. We're not the only town of the 351 towns in the state.
We have to have town meetings.
I'm not promoting Zoom or anything like that. I am promoting as much participation as possible. I think this is wonderful. If you guys feel like slings and arrows or get thrown at me and I don't enjoy that, I don't have any problem with any of this stuff. So seeing folks face to face, I'm sort of passionate about it. I'd like to continue to do it. The reason, unfortunately, that we have been on Zoom for the last 2 meetings after having gone back because of lower COVID sort of protocols in person is because ultimately the door to the vault in town hall broke in the morning. And so, so for the last 2 meetings, I'm just explaining what the last 2 meetings runs it. Anyways, this is not what tonight's about.
Yeah, right. Excuse me. So.
And it was just because of the vote.
I really want to focus on the project, finish up the questions. Another question, sir?
No. That's
Agreed.
good.
All right.
I just want to clarify one statement that Councilor Kuzic just made, and I do understand, given he's pretty new to the town. But in the previous HCA agreements, the citizens weren't really asked any input. As a matter of fact, Mark Ells has said publicly numerous times that the HCA has a confidential process and he couldn't speak to citizens. It wasn't until it was done that he could then share with the public. So to hear him say, oh, we'll have a chance to sit down and hear what you want and take all these things into consideration as we negotiate the HCA is an inaccurate statement.
Any other questions before we finish up?
So I think a question, so what is, and maybe it was there, I was buried in that. So say this goes forward, what is the life expectancy of the cable? And where's the manufacturing?
Someone else wants to like expectancy.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Christina Hoffman. I work for AVANGRID. So I'm going to answer your question. It's a really good question, and it really ties into the life of an offshore wind project. The equipment that would be procured and installed right now, the running standard is about a 25-year life for an offshore wind project, but we are watching a lot of advancements going on in the industry, and so it's likely that it would be longer than that. But I think you could assume that that would be a minimum.
The cable as well?
Yes, correct.
So then,
Where's the cable?
then what happens? After the 25 years, what's like, who pays for it to be disassembled? How?
Yes, absolutely. No, it's a good question. So as part of the permitting that we're doing, and we have to do permitting at the federal level, you know, we're here tonight to talk about the kickoff of the environmental review process at the state level, but we are also doing a companion process with the federal government. And our application to the federal government requires us to outline the installation of the offshore wind farm and all the infrastructure that goes with it, the operation of it for the life of the facility, and then the decommissioning of it. And so the decommissioning of it includes the removal of the equipment that was installed. And there can be sort of case by case decisions made at some point. If, for instance, the community didn't want to have the old conduits pulled up from underneath the road, that they would remain there. You know, there are options basically when the time comes, when the offshore wind farm is no longer operating, as to what happens.
All right, yeah, Mando.
Yes.
Where they make up.
Was the debate, so manufacturing.
Let me talk about
USA made product.
So this right here, this is a Prysmian, Prysmian cable right here. This is a slice of it. If you kind of did a horizontal slice, this is what it would look like. As part of this Commonwealth Wind bid, we made an agreement with this Prysmian company where we said, we will give you the contract for Park City Wind and Commonwealth Wind, almost $1 billion of contract value, if you make these cables in Massachusetts. And they agreed to that. And they decided they reached an agreement at a different point of Brayton Point in the town of Somerset on the south coast to build a manufacturing facility that has started its permitting process and it's planning its construction. So we will use cable made in Somerset, Massachusetts, that'll look like this by Prysmian that we helped compel, made in Somerset, Massachusetts. So that's where the cable will come from. And we're hopeful for all Commonwealth Wind. It's really dependent on when they get that factory up and running. It's possible for Park City Wind that some of the cable initially will come from Europe, but as soon as this Somerset facility is open and running, that's where our cable is coming from. Thank you.
What about the turbines? Where are those made?
For Alex, man, we'll have to come back.
Oh, thank you. As a follow-up to his question, this whole project is going to last 25 years, right? And earlier, Ken, I think is your name, you said that it would take years and years and years and years to do the appropriate studies to find out if another substation location was feasible. I'm all for and being supportive of the environment, all of that. My concern is the wind turbines that I've seen in many places all over the country, those blades fall off and they're never replaced. What, Country Garden, are they using their wind turbine? I don't know. So what happens to the cables don't work, or you have one manufacturer in the United States, which is wonderful for the cable. Everything should be dual sourced. So what is your backup if something happens to the manufacturing facility you're building in Somerset? where exactly in Europe does this cable come from?
Where would our backup cable come from?
Where every product should be dual source, no matter what industry you're in. And it's wonderful that you guys have had the forethought to, have a plant in Massachusetts, all of that. What is your dual source for these cables? Do you have one? You said you'd bring one in from Europe. Where in Europe?
I don't know the answer on the cables. I know on the wind turbines, we have several different wind turbine suppliers making bids to us, making offers to us. So we will have several options to choose from. I'm not sure about this, and Christina, maybe you know better. I thought we were under contract with Prysmian. We intend to get the cable there.
That plant
Hold on.
is even
If we can't, there's plenty of other firms that manufacture cable.
here in the United States.
I don't know if it's here in the United States. One of
Okay, well, that's,
well,
but, I mean, I know it's really new, but it's just a question. I guess, because there's been limited information on this
Yeah.
whole project, and we're all emotional about it because the last few weeks, there's been a wellspring of, we're finding out what we don't know.
yeah.
And there's a lot we don't know.
Let me say one other thing, which is we have a financial incentive to locate as much of our source material as we can domestically. There's a new tax credit that comes.
Right, and that's,
Well,
I
so,
guess it's all good, but the thing, and Z Crocker, I read your article about, it might result in sewers more quickly. It might result in this. It may result in that. We hope for this. None of that is documented contractually that I know of, and it's too early in the process, but you're asking us to put a lot on a wing and a prayer for a huge project that has a lifespan of 25 years. That is amazing. And who follows if you guys don't, and the DPU says, we're not giving you more money. This is what it is, and you guys back off from the project, or, price increases go beyond. Who's gonna pay for that? The taxpayers of Massachusetts, or the taxpayers in the United States of America, or AVANGRID?
if we go forward with a project, we're building the project, we're financially responsible for it. We have to post security in the forms of bonds or guarantees.
Right.
Hold on. So if we're going forward, taxpayers are not gonna get hold the bag here. We're financially responsible for it.
And what if it's, well, I guess
Thank
anything
you.
is possible, but I just look at it like, if there is a crack in a cable or a chip. gets-
Well, there's operation and maintenance that's part of the budget, and we have people who do that work, and there'll be a lot of jobs, by the way, after the manufacturing, there'll be a lot of jobs in operation and maintenance for people in the Commonwealth also. It'll be their job to go out and keep the cables and keep the turbines in good shape.
That's super dangerous.
Thank you. I just have a quick follow-up to what she was just saying, is that when I asked you earlier, you said it years and years to determine whether alternate landing sites will be available or would work for this project. We're talking about Green Point, a few other things. Can you
Is that one in Acushnet, that is 400 megawatts. We looked at it. It needs a complete upgrade. And I'll be happy to get you information on how.
I'm sorry, but you're talking about upgrading all facilities all along the line. Okay, so everything needs an upgrade from what you're doing. Okay,
No,
the question is you upgrade here or somewhere else, that's the same thing.
No, the West Barnstable substation that we're connecting to is able to take that capacity now.
What's the yellow building then on the film?
What's the yellow building?
Was there another existing subdivision building on this one? Mark, you want to explain that one?
I can, so again, this purple shaded parcel is where the project's new substation will go. And so the onshore cables will come from the beach to the new substation, and then the electricity will be, Ken, is it stepped up or down? Stepped up, thank you, up to 345. here, and this is the existing West Barnstable substation here. So there'll be a connection from the project substation, so it's 275 kilovolt coming from the ocean, has to be stepped up to go into the 345 kV system at the substation. There's a cable underground that will run on one of these three routes here to West Barnstable, plug the project into the electric system grid. And just one other thing I wanted to mention, I neglected to say that the cables, as you can see here, they're actually solid dielectric cables. There's no fluid, these are not fluid filled cables. They're all solid. There's no fluid in any of the cables.
Okay, we'll do another Zoom one. Steve, over to you.
Thanks. I'm going to do a written question by Lauren Catapon. Aside from plover and least turn monitoring, what other migratory and protected bird life will be monitored, e.g. osprey or others?
Is this mic on?
I think that one died. So why don't
So in addition to the onshore bird species, there also is an offshore mitigation plan that's being negotiated with the federal government. I know Audubon is involved with some of the negotiations, but the project also will have offshore bird and bat monitoring requirements over the life of the project.
Do another Zoom. Alex, with your pleasure, sir.
Christina.
Are we doing a Zoom one?
Yeah, we'll do another Zoom one first.
Excuse me, sorry.
Steve, go ahead.
A written question from Nancy Ryan. You briefly spoke of federal permits. Would those have to be granted before any work would happen on or near Douses?
Yes, all federal permits will need to be in hand, and in fact, the order of operations typically is we have to have all state permits in hand prior to the federal government's permits. For instance, the Army Corps, we need our state 401 water quality certificate. So the federal government wants to make sure that if there are more stringent standards in the state regulations, that the project and the project proponent has that permit in hand before the Army Corps will issue their final permit. And some of the other state agencies, the other federal agencies follow suit with other state actions. So typically, although we're filing at the same time, we're going through the process. Federal regulators are reviewing the process now, and state regulators will be reviewing the process. We have to have our state permits before the federal process can conclude.
Can I just, last one, and just maybe indulgence in your mind, Alex, someone asked earlier during the presentation, can someone walk on the beach while the construction is happening? Do we have an answer to that? I think that gentleman might have left, unfortunately, but if we can have that answer.
No, it was me.
Oh, there you go.
I just
Ken.
Oh, there's sequence. Thank you.
The answer is yes. We go through, actually, because you go back, Mark, to the overview of the beach, would be to sequence the construction such that there'll always be a portion of the beach, the parking lot available to the general public. And what that would look like is when the work is being done in the southern portion, we would attempt, and we would maintain a way to, a corridor, a lane for the public to drive up onto the beach. And they would have full access to the northern, which I guess is actually eastern portion. So you could park your car, get out, go on the beach. Then the opposite becomes true when the work is conducted on the eastern portions of the parking lot, where general public could drive in, park near the existing bathhouse, and then access the beach from that area.
And can you walk the beach while it's drilling?
Yes, you can walk the beach during the drilling.
Okay. Alex, you say one last Zoom, or what's your?
finish this.
Okay, last Zoom. Steve, well, this is the last we're going to take from Zoom.
Okay, William Cliff, I'm going to give you permission. Please unmute yourself.
I talked earlier and I have no further comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Zoom. Alex, any last
questions? Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
Thanks for telling us that, about 25 years or so that, the cable is gonna be replaced, whatever happens. And in terms of the funding in the 26th year, I mean, what happens? So let's say it's a $10 billion project roughly now for all of the windmills. And let's say 25 years from now, the cost is $20 billion. Are there guarantees from the feds, from the state? I don't know if it lasts, per capita, if you will, to do it then. But I'm thinking about, pray to God I'm around in 25 years, but where's the funding gonna come for to replenish, all the cables, and you have to tear up the roads again and that type of thing?
Sure, thanks for the question. I hope I'm around in 25 years as well. And, the costs that the project would require after 25 years are very low compared to what you're referencing, I think, right now, which is the large capital expenditure that needs to happen to build these projects. So if we build them in the next few years, then we transition to the operation and maintenance phase. And so that phase is funded, that is built in to our project in terms of what is the budget required to operate and maintain these for up to or even beyond 25 years. So that's included in the financing right now. And after we turn on the wind turbines, that will also be generating the funds that are going to be coming back in.
Alex, if you might indulge me, I just want to, at the end here, I want to really thank on behalf of our team, Cindy Cotton, your librarian here at the Osterville Library, for having us here tonight. Thank you, Cindy. And just one more thing. Second thing is that the video of tonight's meeting will be on the Osterville Library's YouTube page. So if you want to watch it, it'll be available once Cindy and our team get it up. Third is I heard from the community tonight, when we have other large permitting hearings like this, where we expect a large turnout, we will gladly book the Barnstable High School Performing Arts Center if that's the preference of the community.
And just one final note, because we heard some people say that they didn't know about public meetings that were coming up. So we really encourage you to go to the commonwealthwind.com website and sign up so that you can get notices to your email box about when we're going to be having the meetings. And you can also see them listed right on that website as well. Thanks so much for coming.
Okay, I think there was one more question. Sorry. Yeah,
we already have information from the wind project at Block Island. And Block Island was supposed to dig them 8 feet down, and they only did them 4. And they found in a very few months, they were exposed. And so they had to surcharge $20 million to the customers, and they had to redig them to 8 feet. And it still does not provide the energy for Block Island. So, the point you're saying, and the other point this gentleman made about Denmark doesn't have hurricanes. And also, I have an article right here you can use that shows that they have 9 cables that are exposed from the sand and the beds. And 90% of all wind energy companies use these same cables. So this is not me making this up, it's right there. So you can find it, just Google it.
Thank you very much. Okay, great. All right, I think we'll finish up for tonight. Thank you, everyone. Please submit comments, and I appreciate you coming.